No.
No,
No?
but you started screen sharing.
There
There.
we go.
Well done.
All right. It takes time for, flunky. Anyway, so this is an elfin saddle. I saw this mushroom when I was mowing the lawn. It intrigued me. I picked it up, looked at it. It's like kind of made out of a candle wax. And little small thing that looks like a saddle, kind of sit on, blah, blah, blah. I found 26 other mushrooms that day, looking around my yard, a fairy ring, boletus, all kinds of mushrooms that I knew nothing about. So what happened? Well, I said, this is interesting. So I bought a book, and this is called the Savory Wild Mushroom book. And it tells you all about mushrooms, and most of them are native to the Pacific Northwest. About 200 mushrooms. It tells you the spore prints, tells you what they look like, tells you their edibility, maybe the kind of environment to find them in. So I kept trying to learn more and trying to identify mushrooms on my own. And so then I went out and started doing that. And come on, there we go. I took spore prints, and this is what spore prints look like. And spore prints are different colors for different mushrooms, and that really helps you break down the difference between a mushroom that looks similar to another mushroom. One has a yellow spore print, one has a white, one has a black, brown, tan. There's like 10 different colors that they use that are common. So anyway, after that, I went to something called the Puget Sound Mycological Society presentation at the Pacific Science Center. And they had a huge room full of mushrooms on tables there. And I checked out all the ones I had identified, and they were the right ones because they had them all identified there for me. So I felt pretty comfortable. And after that, I started eating mushrooms from the woods around us. And so, come on back. So anyway, this is a picture of a giant cauliflower mushroom. Okay, and it's actually super good, really good for breakfast. You put a little egg on it and saute it. It was awesome. Anyway.
Wait, Andy, is that you?
That's me when I was, a few years younger, right? And it looks like I'm taking all the credit for finding this mushroom. But however, the real truth, not many people know, my wife Jan found that mushroom, not me.
Wow.
But anyway, so we found that in Packwood, and we went hunting we found chanterelles all over the place. We went to Weyerhaeuser property up in Enumclaw, the power lines up in Purdy, just all over the place. And what we were doing then was looking for this little magic yellow mushroom, the chanterelle, the most famous mushroom in the state of Washington. So we, all those places were places that we found chanterelles and bagged them and brought them home. And what did we do with them? We sauteed them and ate them, in all kinds of whatever, stews, soups by themselves. And then we'd always get a lot. And so we'd saute them up with a little garlic and freeze them and save them to make mushroom soup. And so Don, who's not here, posted my mushroom soup recipe on Facebook, and maybe it's going to be in the bulletin. And it's a little French book that Jan had that has, and I followed this recipe all the time, except for two things. One is, it says 1.5 pounds of mushrooms, and I never used that few mushrooms. I used a lot more than that. And about half of them you puree up, and the other half becomes sliced up into the soup itself. And then the French would run all this soup before they put the slices in through a sieve to try to get it really like pure. But I never did that. I let it be a little heartier than that. Other than that, I followed that recipe, and I still do today. All right, so then the other mushroom that we chased was a morel, and the morel grows on, it's associated with trees. So like the chanterelle is associated with Doug fir, grows on this side of the mountains all over the place. Well, this Morels are associated with pine trees, which grow all over on the east side of the Cascades and on the slope. And you can actually follow up the snow melt and find them there as and May and June are the best times to find them over there. And they grow more prolific if there's been a fire or something like that. We used to hunt in a place in Plain before the Courage Classic took us there. We used to hunt in the hills there and get morels. So, and then here's a king bolete or Boletus edulis. And you can see it's a huge mushroom, and that's not me. That's a picture I found on the internet. But I've found them almost probably 2/3 that size, and I didn't find a lot of them. They're hard to find, but when you do, you're happy. And those are supposedly the best mushroom there is. I don't know, truffle maybe, blah, blah, blah. Those are, the top 2 of all mushrooms. What else? Okay, so shaggy manes, I've hunted those. Oyster mushrooms, I've hunted those. Shaggy manes, you want to cook right away because they dissolve into ink within 24 hours, pretty quick. All right, so there's a meadow mushroom on the left, which is the same as the store mushrooms you get. It's called agaricus is the genus or species. I don't remember which. And a red juice milky cap on the right, which is tastes like an artichoke and a mushroom crossed. I eat it. I don't know anybody else that eats it besides me, but anyway. That's the end of my slide. And here's the book I recommend now. It's the same book I bought back that was published in 72. This is like an 88, 89 version. And Daniel Stuntz, I met him. He was a professor at the University of Washington. And I went to a symposium one time and met a bunch of the mushroom guys back in the 70s. Anyway, without further ado, let's let Adam tell us about the real part of mushrooms and not my own personal idiosyncratic history.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm not sure about my internet connection here, but we'll just see how. Yeah, my name is Adam Deleo. Like Andy said, I'm out here on the Key Peninsula, and my wife and I started Adam's Mushrooms. It was about 8 years ago now, and we started off at the indoor market over there on Willotchit, and then have since now we do markets in Tacoma. We do the Proctor one, the downtown one on Thursdays, and then the Puyallup Farmers Market as well, and do a lot of business with local chefs and a couple of the grocery stores. So yeah, I guess my adventure with mushrooms goes back probably at least 10 years, and was really I was looking for a way to move on from commercial fishing. I'd kind of felt like I'd spent enough time doing that, and during that time when I was trying to figure out what we were going to do, we stumbled into Paul Stamets, who's a Washington State guy that does just tons of mycology, and he gave a presentation on mushrooms and how they can help save the world, which was a little bit maybe over the top, but it's cool, and it's the direction that a lot of it's the why for a lot of reasons that mushroom people are into it. For me, I had to save my own world first before I could go on, which meant I needed to get a business up and going. And we started growing mushrooms, and shortly thereafter kind of fell in love with the abundance that was found in our local forests. Namely, as Andy was saying, the chanterelles are a huge part of that. And yeah, the list goes on. The WSDA actually has a specific list of mushrooms that you are allowed to sell for commercial purposes that are wild harvested. So we use that as our guideline for, it helps kind of put a boundary around what you're looking for. I think for anyone that's like interested in going mushrooms in our local forests, and they do grow in a lot of the Gig Harbor area, the larger parks for sure, is to take some time and familiarize yourself with the poisonous mushrooms in the area. And then also with maybe 5 of the choice edibles that we have that grow here. And then, you know, probably only really a handful of the poisonous ones that you really need to know as well. And once you get familiar with those two kind of extremes of the spectrum, you can take your time getting to know the in-betweens. To avoid, because there's a lot of stuff that might give you some upset stomach, but there's only a couple that'll seriously harm you. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything specific mushroom questions out there that people are curious about, or if my video is going through even for that matter.
Your video is coming through. We can see you. I'm particularly interested in the chanterelles, Adam.
Yes.
I have gone out and found them before. They're very abundant. We were on a Forest Service road, but I don't know much about them. When is the best time to go? And can you tell me the best way to preserve them if you've bought more than you can use?
Yeah. So chanterelles, you know, you can find chanterelles already. There's always a summer crop, but the real abundance comes once the rains return and the temperatures drop. Then they really go for it. And then you can get into these huge collections where, yeah, if you're not selling them, you're like, what could I possibly do with all these mushrooms? And my two favorite ways of preserving a chanterelle would be, first of all, just chopping them up, cooking them down, however. And then vacuum pack it, or you can load a muffin, a cupcake tray. You can fill each of those holes up with some of these cooked mushrooms and freeze it, and then those little pucks, and you have kind of like a serving size of mushrooms that you can throw into a soup or into a stir fry or a pasta sauce, and they're all ready to go, and they store really well that way once they've been cooked.
So you cook them and then freeze them in packets. We're losing you, Adam.
I have a comment.
Whoops, I might turn my video off.
Yeah, your bandwidth would be better probably.
Yeah, there we go. Let's try that.
I have a comment.
Yeah, what's up, Ray?
A couple of things. First of all, Pat's here, and she lived in Rock Grove in Illinois, and it was great tradition out there to get morels, and they seem to grow around. She can tell you more about this than I can, but they seem to grow around the old elk trees, elm trees. But we had Dutch elm disease in Illinois, and while there was rotting wood on the ground, the morels were everywhere, but now they're pretty much gone. And the second thing, maybe Pat will fill in on that after I say this next comment. Second thing is, in France, and I believe in Switzerland, the custom is to pick your mushrooms and go to the pharmacy and have the pharmacist check them out so that you don't get a mushroom that has bad qualities.
They
Pat, you want to talk about morels?
they do the same thing in Germany, where you can collect mushrooms and they will identify them for you.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Pharmacy, yeah.
But they have some deadly ones in Europe.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as a child, that was a big hobby for our family during mushroom season, to go out hunting the morel specifically. And you were talking about preserving them. We didn't really find any way to preserve them. So if we found a bunch, we would have huge platters for dinner of morel mushrooms because, well, everybody loved them. But the other thing is they didn't last very long. So we did eat them all at once.
And they were delicious.
Oh, they were just absolutely incredible.
But we did something similar in Germany. We would get baskets full of meadow mushrooms. Really go out and get them by the basket. But Adam, I have a question. The difference between the yellow and the white chanterelle, do you prefer the white over the yellow one?
Oh, I honestly think they're very comparable. I do notice the white ones have a sweeter smell, but I haven't really found that it translates into the flavor.
Well, I always thought the white one a little bit firmer in their structure.
Yeah, when they're like this time of year, when they're in their button stage, when they're still small dense mushrooms, they're very firm and meaty. Later in the year, they get so kind of big and blown out. They cross the line and get kind of soggy, and at that point,
Yeah, when they're
you really
solid,
have.
they don't taste anymore, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I've only found one bolete in this country here. I've never found another one. So boletes are
oh
my
yeah.
favorite.
You got to work for the bleats. They do pop up on the coast. They'll
Okay.
associate with spruce trees out there, and then also in the spring, there's a big crop that, well, not every spring, but when it happens up in the Cascades, kind of in May and June
Yeah,
on the
it's
east side, there'll be.
bolete. It's what we
But
call
it's a
the
mountain.
king of the mushrooms, bolete, right? It's the best
Yeah,
mushroom
yeah.
ever.
Yeah, and they
Adam,
often come out in mass all at once, and so people will slice them up and dry them
Yeah.
as a way of preserving them.
In Italy, they serve them with polenta.
Oh yeah.
Adam,
Yes.
I'd like to know what I've picked and gone out and found the ones that are yellow or orangish and frilly. What are those?
That's probably a chanterelle.
Chanterelle?
That
Because
would be
they're
my
bright orange in the forest.
Yeah, there's a more of a redder orange mushroom.
Okay.
Well, you also have the lobster mushroom, right? Which is orange. It's bright orange.
Yeah, this is frilly edges though. It's real kind of.
I think the frilly edge is probably a chanterelle.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good. They're delicious. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Adam? Oh, sorry.
Oh, Tamas, you're muted.
Oh, Adam, this is Tamas. I have a question on truffles. Last night on Channel 9, there was this show on, and they showed cultivation of truffles that they were planting. They made the soil, they put a lot of lime in it, and then they planted a tree, and then they were going to put truffle spores on that and grow them and harvest them. Is that a possibility in Washington? Andy started his talk talking about that you had an amazing truffle that you were selling. I didn't know that because we've bought a lot from you. We love your mushrooms. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I know there's at least one truffle plantation up. I want to say it's in Arlington, somewhere north of Seattle. I visited it, but the trees were still young. So I think people that do that, it's you're taking a chance, and it can take maybe 10 years for the trees to mature to where they're producing the truffles, well, the trees and the fungus underneath them. And it's very, like you say, it's intensive. You have to
Interesting. I had a friend
really
in
amend
Charlotte.
the soils to the right environment.
I had a friend in
You were going
Charlottesville.
in-
He planted hazelnut trees and then had Brussels truffle things at the bottom. So they were hoping for harvesting truffles.
What's the cost of a truffle?
Right now we're selling them for $20 an ounce, and an ounce truffle it's golf ball, maybe a little larger than a golf ball. So that's about what $20 gets you. But there's a huge range from a summer truffle till the later you get in the season, the more expensive the truffles get because they become more aromatic and more flavorful. And really kind of the peak of the most expensive truffles is in winter, where you have the Perigord black truffle and you have the Alba white truffle, which I think Alba white truffle, they can fetch up to $4,000 a pound. That would be a high market, but
a mere trifle.
So Adam, I'm reading a book called The Entangled Life. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, Sheldrake, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so do you know anything about the beehive mycelium?
Oh, I don't, it's not my area of expertise, but I'm aware that they've started using a mushroom extract to kind of, they feed the bees water that's been, or maybe the bees walk across it. I can't quite remember, but in some way it prevents a mite or a bacteria, or, you know, they're trying to prevent colony collapse using the immune stimulating properties of the mushroom, I believe.
It's a fascinating book.
Yeah. Mushrooms are a fascinating world. It's kind of one of those things, you know, you could go on forever learning more stuff about them, and it's very fascinating.
I think the beehive mushroom is the largest organism alive right now.
Oh, the honey mushroom. Okay, sorry.
Honey mushroom, yeah. Largest organism on Earth right now.
Yeah, there's a massive colony down in Oregon, I believe.
Yep.
How large is it?
It covers acres. It's
Yeah.
mushroom.
Kidding.
I think it's like
Wow.
10,000 acres or something, but I'd have to look it up.
I think mycelium is fascinating. I mean, the whole world. It's amazing, but anyway.
Yeah,
Hey, Adam?
really, yes.
We had a birch tree that had to be cut down, and the stump, after a while, there seemed to be mushrooms growing out of the sides of the stump, you know, closer to the ground. Were those really mushrooms?
Oh yeah, probably the reason your birch tree had to get cut down was that it had a fungal infection. And then once the tree is down, the fungus that's living in that tree knows that it's time to produce a mushroom to spread its spores to go on, you know, and try and find a new food source, essentially.
Are they edible or not?
Oh, I have no idea what mushrooms were growing on your tree, you know.
Birch ones.
But probably not.
Probably not. Okay.
There's really a fairly small percentage of mushrooms that you see are edible, and generally they're growing out in a fir forest. You know, you might find oyster mushrooms growing on a birch tree. You might find some of the medicinal type mushrooms like a turkey tail or something like that growing on a birch tree. But yeah.
What about those ones you find in your lawn, the white ones? What are those?
Well, there could be lots of white ones growing in your yard. There's puffballs that grow in your yard, maybe. And theoretically, all puffballs are edible before they turn into a big spory mess, which is like when you step on it and it puffs. That would be too late. But when they're young and firm, I don't go out hunting down puffballs to eat. But I think even in Eastern Washington, they get into, they're meant to be really good, but I've never harvested them. But yeah, I mean, I can walk around in my yard and find little white mushrooms, and I'm like, I don't know what all the little mushrooms are. There's thousands of varieties, and we do focus on kind of a core group of them. Every once in a while, I'll see a mushroom enough times, and I'm like, I need to know what you are, just because I'm curious. But there are more mushrooms than there is time in the day to.
Adam, you started this talk saying a lot of people get into mushrooming as a way to save the world. And that I thought was a really interesting statement. I was thinking, well, why would I be into it? I might be able to answer that for myself, why it might be able to save the world. But is there a predominant theme about people who are interested in mushrooms and saving the world? I thought that was.
I think that's a little bit poetic, of course, but yeah, I think there's a lot of hope amongst mushroom enthusiasts, and especially kind of your citizen scientist type mushroom people that see a lot of promise in everything from human health and longevity to bioremediation, in which you'd use mushroom to clean an ecosystem from pollutants, because many of them are bioaccumulators, or they'll amass heavy metal, and then you can remove that mushroom from the environment and put it somewhere or bury it or whatever it is. But there's a lot of different fields of mycology that are kind of new and yeah, have a lot of promise for alternative approaches to yeah, taking care of some of our problems. You know, I've read at one point in time, I haven't followed up on it lately, but there's a fungus that can eat plastics, but that's a double-edged sword. Got to be a little careful what you wish for. They've definitely, Paul Stamets has done studies where they've cleaned up oil-sodden soils using oyster mushroom. And yeah, they're, you know, using, they'll float these big straw booms out there when there's been an oil spill, and then they can inoculate that with oyster mushroom, and it'll degrade the oils back into just simple carbons, and
Well, that's cool.
that type of stuff for sure. And I, you know, titles like that are definitely to grab attention and to kind of, yeah, make you curious about what's inside a book. But there is a lot of really neat sort of biotech implications. Also, you know, there's a company that's designing or that's creating packaging material. Instead of using styrofoam, they're building molds and injecting them with cellulose, corn husk, or some sort of agricultural byproduct, and then inoculating that form with a specific mycelium that grows really strong, and it essentially turns that mold into a big piece of insulation. But you can shape it like you would a polystyrene, but it's biodegradable. It's pretty neat.
That's it. Thank you.
Well, I have to thank Andy and Adam for putting this together and informing us. I think it's getting to be mushroom soup time. Got some great recipes. And Adam, your mushrooms are at Harbor Greens, and is that right? And the Proctor Farmers Market, is that right?
Yeah, I think I missed the first part, but yeah, we're at the Proctor Farmers Market every Saturday until mid-December.
Okay, and Harbor Greens?
Harbor Greens, yeah. Harbor Greens carries our shiitakes. They'll carry our chanterelles when we get into the main season. And they also have a lot of our dried varieties available there. So you can get dried morels or porcini or a mix of things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.